The Cosmic Academy floated like a silver jewel in the endless black of space. Its halls buzzed with life, students from every corner of the galaxy gathered here to learn, compete, and prove their worth. Towering spires glowed with shifting colors, and bridges of light connected floating classrooms. It was a place of wonder, built for the brightest minds of 1,000 worlds. But for Kale, a human from Earth, it felt like stepping into a room full of giants who thought he'd break if they breathed too hard. Kale adjusted the straps of his simple pack as he stepped off the shuttle. His dark hair stuck to his forehead from the humid Earth air he'd left behind, and his boots thudded softly on the Academy's smooth floor. Around him, aliens chattered in languages he couldn't yet understand. A feathered creature with glowing eyes floated past, Lila, he'd learn later, an empath from a gas giant called Viora. A hulking figure made of cracked stone stomped by, Tor, a warrior from the volcanic planet Kren. Then there was V, a shimmering cloud of energy from a star cluster, flickering like a living flame. They all glanced at Kale, their stares a mix of pity and amusement. To them, he was a curiosity, a fragile thing from a soft world. The first day was a blur. Kale sat in a massive lecture hall, its ceiling a swirling hologram of distant galaxies. Instructor Kor, a being with 6 tentacles and a voice like bubbling water, led the class on planetary survival. Kor's eyes, 3 of them, fixed on Kale as they spoke. Earth, yes. A gentle paradise, I hear. No crushing gravity, no acid rains. How lucky for you. The class rippled with laughter, Tor's deep rumble shaking the floor, V's light pulsing with smug glee. Lila tilted her head, her feathers rustling, but said nothing. Kale clenched his jaw. Gentle? He'd grown up fishing in storms, hiking mountains, and dodging snakes. Earth wasn't gentle, it was alive, wild, and unforgiving. But he stayed quiet, letting them underestimate him. That night, in his small dorm room, Kale stared out at the stars. The Academy's walls shifted to mimic Earth's sky, a small comfort. He thought of home, its crashing waves, its howling winds. Aliens saw humans as weak because they didn't glow or tower over mountains. But Kale knew better. He'd show them. The next day, in class, Instructor Kor floated to the front. Survival is the test of a species, they said, tentacles waving. Each of you will present your planet's toughest challenge. Something that shaped your people. Tor grinned, showing jagged teeth. V flared brighter. Lila's feathers fluffed with excitement. When Kor's gaze landed on Kale, their tone softened. For you, Earthling, perhaps something small. We wouldn't want to overwhelm you. Kale leaned back in his seat, a spark lighting his eyes. Oh, I've got something, he said simply. Tor snorted. What, a breeze that mussed your hair? V chimed in, or a puddle you tripped over. The class laughed again, but Lila leaned closer, her voice soft. What's it like, your world? Kale turned to her, his smile growing. Ever try swimming in wild waters? Where things hunt you back? Her feathers stilled, wide eyes locked on him. The others didn't notice, too busy mocking him. Instructor Kor clapped 2 tentacles. Good. Prepare your projects. We begin tomorrow. Alone later, Kale sat at a desk, a glowing datapad in hand. He pulled up images of Earth, its oceans, its forests, its creatures. The aliens thought humans were soft because they didn't see the truth. Earth wasn't a paradise, it was a battleground, and humans had fought to thrive there. He scrolled past mountains and deserts, stopping at a vast blue expanse. The ocean. That's where he'd start. Something simple, something they'd never expect. He tapped the screen, and a sleek, gray shape appeared, a tiger shark, cutting through waves like a living blade. Kale grinned. This would be fun. The next morning, he walked into class with his head high. The room hummed with energy, students whispering about their projects. Tor bragged about a lava beast that melted stone. V boasted of a swarm that devoured stars. Lila murmured about a wind predator that shredded clouds. Kale sat silently, his datapad ready. When Instructor Core called his name, the room went quiet, waiting for a joke. Kale stood, meeting their stares. Earth's got a lot of challenges, he began. But I'll start with the water. Tor rolled his eyes. V flickered with boredom. Lila leaned forward. Kale tapped his pad, and a hologram of the ocean flickered to life. Let's talk about what lives there, he said, his voice steady. The screen zoomed in on the tiger shark, and Kale's smile widened. This was just the beginning. The Cosmic Academy's library glowed like a living thing, its walls pulsing with soft light as shelves of holographic data rearranged themselves. Kale sat at a curved table, his datapad casting a blue glow across his face. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the Academy's systems and the occasional rustle of Lila's feathers. She'd followed him here, her curiosity pulling her along like a tether. What's that? She asked, peering at the image of the tiger shark on his screen. Its sleek body cut through holographic waves, jaws lined with jagged teeth. Kale glanced up, a spark in his eyes. This is what I'm showing them tomorrow. A tiger shark. It's just one of Earth's hunters. Lila's feathers fluffed slightly, her voice a whisper. It looks dangerous. Kale nodded. It is. And that's the point. He leaned back, thinking about the day ahead. The aliens saw humans as fragile, slow, soft, easily broken. He'd read their records in the Academy's database. Earth was listed as a low-threat habitat, a place of gentle hills and calm winds. Kale almost laughed. They'd never seen a hurricane rip trees from the ground or a blizzard bury whole towns. And the oceans? They didn't even know where to start. He tapped his pad, pulling up more footage, sharks gliding through murky water, their eyes cold and focused. Lila watched, her feathers trembling. You swim with these? She asked. Sometimes, Kale said, grinning. But we're smart about it. She tilted her head, glowing eyes wide. Smart, or crazy? Kale chuckled. Maybe both. The next morning, the lecture hall buzzed with energy. Students crowded around their seats, their chatter filling the air. Instructor Core floated to the front, tentacles waving as they called the class to order. Today, you share your planet's survival challenges, they said, their voice bubbling. Begin. Tor went first, stomping to the presentation platform. His hologram roared to life, a massive lava beast, its body glowing red-hot, melting stone as it moved. This is the fire jaw, Tor rumbled, his stone chest puffed out. It shaped my people. Only the strongest survive its heat. The class murmured, impressed. V followed, their energy form flickering as they summoned a swarm of star-eating drones, tiny, glittering specks that devoured light itself. No one escapes them, V hummed, their voice smug. Lila's turn came next, her feathers rustling as she showed a wind predator, a sleek, winged thing that shredded clouds with razor claws. It hunts in storms, she said softly. We learn to hide. Then it was Kale's turn. He stood, feeling the weight of every stare, Tor's smirk, V's pulsing amusement, Instructor Core's pitying gaze. He tapped his datapad, and the room dimmed as a hologram of Earth's ocean swelled to life. Waves crashed silently, a vast blue stretching beyond sight. This is home, Kale said, his voice steady. Earth's covered in water, 70% of it. And it's not empty. He zoomed in, and the tiger shark appeared, cutting through the waves with deadly grace. Its striped body gleamed, muscles rippling as it turned, jaws snapping at an unseen target. The class went still. This is a tiger shark, Kale continued. It's fast, 50 kilometers an hour in water. Strong enough to crush bone. And it doesn't stop hunting. Tor snorted, his voice like grinding rocks. It's just a fish. V flickered, adding, a glowing drone could fry it. Even Instructor Core waved a tentacle dismissively. Simple enough. Earth's creatures are quaint. But Lila leaned forward, her feathers quivering with awe. It's so alive, she whispered. Kale smiled, at least one of them got it. He tapped the pad again, and the hologram shifted to show the shark hunting. It darted through the water, chasing a school of fish, then struck, jaws wide, teeth tearing through flesh in a blur. The footage slowed, showing every detail, the power, the precision, the hunger. A ripple of unease spread through the room. Tor's smirk faded. V dimmed slightly. Instructor Core's tentacles twitched. It's not just about strength, Kale said, his voice growing bolder. Sharks have senses we can barely match. They smell blood from kilometers away. They feel the tiniest movements in the water. They've survived on Earth for millions of years, longer than most of your planets have had life. He paused, letting that sink in. The aliens loved bragging about their ancient histories, but Earth's creatures were older, tougher, forged in chaos. He switched the hologram to a close-up of the shark's jaws. See these teeth? They're sharp enough to cut through anything. And if they lose one, another grows back. Always ready. The room was quieter now, the laughter gone. Tor shifted, his stone skin creaking. So it swims and bites. Big deal. Kale met his gaze, unflinching. It's not just one. There are millions of them. And they're not even the worst thing in our oceans. V flared briefly, their voice sharp. Worse than that? Instructor Core cut in, their tone nervous. Kale, perhaps this is enough. We don't want to overwhelm the class. Kale ignored them, tapping his pad again. The hologram flickered, showing a shadow moving beneath the waves, bigger, darker, faster. This is just the beginning, he said, his grin widening. Wait till you see what else we swim with. Lila's feathers stood on end, her voice a squeak. There's more. Tor crossed his arms, but his eyes stayed on the hologram. V pulsed unevenly, their usual confidence wavering. The rest of the class leaned forward, caught between fear and fascination. Kale let the tension hang, savoring it. He'd spent weeks being the weak one, the human they pitied. Now they were listening. Really listening. He thought of Earth, its wild beauty, its unrelenting challenges. Humans didn't just survive there, they thrived, explored, conquered. And he was about to show these aliens why. Instructor Core floated closer, tentacles curling anxiously. Kale, I must insist, but a student in the back, a small, spiky creature, interrupted. No, let him finish. Others nodded, their voices rising. Kale raised a hand, calm but firm. Don't worry. I've got plenty to share. He tapped the pad, and the shadow in the hologram grew clearer, an orca, its black and white body slicing through the water, leading a pack. The class gasped. Kale leaned forward, his voice low. These hunt together. Smart. Strong. And they don't mess around. The footage rolled, orcas flipping seals into the air, working as a team, their calls echoing through the water. The aliens stared, wide-eyed, as Kale's words sank in. Earth wasn't soft. And neither was he. The lecture hall at Cosmic Academy felt smaller now, the air thick with tension. The hologram of the orca pack still hovered above Kale's datapad, their sleek bodies weaving through the water in perfect harmony. The aliens sat frozen, their usual chatter replaced by stunned silence. Tor's stone arms were crossed tight, his jagged face set in a scowl. V's energy form flickered dimly, like a candle caught in a draft. Lila's feathers stood straight up, her glowing eyes locked on the swirling images. Instructor Core floated near the front, tentacles curling and uncurling, their voice a shaky bubble. Kale, this is excessive. Perhaps we should pause, but the class erupted in protest. No. Keep going. What's next? Kale hid a smile. They wanted more. Good. He'd give them more. He tapped his pad, and the hologram shifted. The Orcus faded, replaced by a deeper, darker ocean scene. Something massive moved in the shadows, long, coiling arms tipped with suckers, eyes like cold moons glaring from the abyss. This, Kale said, his voice steady, is a giant squid. We don't even know how big they get. They live so deep, we've barely seen them. But what we have seen. It's enough. The hologram lunged forward, showing the squid's arms wrapping around a struggling fish, pulling it apart with brutal strength. Gasps rippled through the room. Lila squeaked, it's huge. Tor grunted, looks slow. Kale shook his head. Not slow. Fast. Strong. And it's got hooks in those suckers, sharp enough to tear through anything. He let the squid linger in the air, its eerie grace sinking in, then switched the scene again. Now the hologram showed a delicate, translucent shape floating in shallow water, a box jellyfish, its tendrils trailing like deadly threads. This one's smaller, Kale said, but don't let that fool you. Its venom can stop a heart in minutes. Even hours. And it's not rare, thousands of them drift in our oceans. V dimmed further, their voice a faint hum. You, live with that? Kale nodded. We do. We swim there anyway. Study them. Learn how to avoid them, or treat the stings. The class stared, grappling with the idea that humans didn't just hide from these things, they faced them head-on. Instructor Core's tentacles flailed. Kale, this is too much. Your planet sounds like a death trap. Kale turned to them, calm but firm. It's not a trap. It's home. And we don't just survive it, we explore it. He tapped his pad, and the hologram exploded into chaos, a tiger shark breaching the surface, jaws snapping at a seal, an orca pod circling prey with chilling precision, a giant squid vanishing into the dark. Then came the humans, divers in cages, grinning as sharks circled them, scientists tagging jellyfish with steady hands, boats cutting through storms to chase the unknown. This is us, Kale said, his voice rising. We built ships to cross these waters. We dive in to meet these creatures. We turn fear into curiosity. The room was a mess of reactions now. Tor's stone skin cracked faintly at the edges, a hairline fracture showing his unease. V's light pulsed erratically, like they couldn't process it. Lila gripped her seat, feathers trembling with a mix of awe and terror. You swim with them? She asked again, louder this time. In cages, yeah, Kale said. Sometimes without. For fun. The class gasped as the hologram zoomed in on a diver, face to face with a tiger shark, separated only by metal bars. The shark's teeth gleamed, but the human's eyes sparkled with excitement. That's insane, someone muttered. That's human, Kale corrected, his grin sharp. Instructor Core tried again, floating closer. Enough, Kale. This is disturbing the class. But the students shouted them down. No, let him talk. What else is there? Show us. Kale raised a hand, quieting them. Okay. You want the truth? Here's more. He switched the hologram to a feeding frenzy, dozens of tiger sharks tearing into a whale carcass, water churning red. The sound of ripping flesh echoed faintly through the room speakers. Tor flinched. V shrank into a tight ball of light. Lila whispered, it's beautiful, and terrifying. Kale nodded. That's Earth. Beautiful. Terrifying. And we live in it every day. He stepped forward, his voice growing stronger. These aren't even the smartest ones. Orcas. They plan. They teach each other. One pod learned to tip ice floes to knock seals into the water. Another uses waves to wash prey off beaches. They're like us, always adapting. The hologram shifted to show an orca pod working together, their movements precise, almost playful. The aliens watched, mesmerized. Kale kept going. And the squid? We found scars on whales from fights with them. Battles we never see, down in the dark. Our oceans are full of mysteries, and we keep chasing them. The class was on edge now, hanging on his words. Instructor Core's form wobbled, their authority slipping. Kale, I insist, wait, Tor interrupted, his deep voice cutting through. He's not done. It was the first time Tor hadn't mocked him. Kale met his gaze and nodded. Thanks. Because I'm not. The ocean's just half the story. He tapped his pad, and the hologram shifted to land, a towering grizzly bear rearing up, claws glinting, roar shaking the air. Ever heard of this? He asked, his tone teasing. The room erupted. What's that? It's huge. Does it swim too? Kale laughed. No, this one's on land. And it's not even the worst. Lila leaned closer, her voice a whisper. You live with these two? Yep, Kale said. Hunt them sometimes. Keep them as neighbors other times. Depends. V flared briefly, their hum shaky. Neighbors? With that? Kale shrugged. Earth's big. We share it. The hologram zoomed in on the bear's paws, massive, deadly, yet somehow majestic. The class couldn't look away. Instructor Core floated back, defeated, as students bombarded Kale with questions. How do you sleep? What else is there? Are you all like this? Kale held up his hands, grinning. One at a time. But yeah, we're all like this. Curious. Stubborn. Tough. He let the bear linger in the air, its presence a challenge to every alien in the room. They'd thought humans were soft, breakable, a species to pity. Now they saw the truth, Earth wasn't a paradise, it was a forge, and humans were its steel. Kale felt the shift, the way their stares changed from amusement to something sharper, respect, maybe even fear. He tapped his pad, the bear fading back to the ocean, a final shark circling in the waves. That's the water, he said. Want to know about the land? The class nodded, breathless. Kale's grin widened. Good. Because we're just getting started. Part 4, A New Respect, 1800 words. The lecture hall at Cosmic Academy was a storm of noise and light. The hologram of the grizzly bear still loomed over Kale's datapad, its massive form frozen mid-roar, claws gleaming like knives. The aliens couldn't tear their eyes away. Tor's stone skin creaked as he leaned forward, his usual scowl replaced by something closer to awe. V's energy form pulsed unevenly, their glow dimmer than ever. Lila's feathers fluttered wildly, her glowing eyes darting between Kale and the bear. Instructor Core hovered at the front, tentacles limp, their attempt to stop the presentation long forgotten. The class buzzed with questions, voices overlapping. What else lives there? How do you fight that? Are all humans this crazy? Kale raised his hands, his voice cutting through the chaos. Hold on. I'll show you. He tapped his pad, and the bear faded, replaced by a golden shape stalking through tall grass, a lion, its mane catching the sunlight, muscles rippling with every step. This is a lion, Kale said, letting the hologram prowl across the room. Fast. Strong. Hunts in groups like orcas. One bite can crush a skull. The lion lunged, jaws snapping at an unseen target, and the class flinched as one. Lila whispered, it's majestic. Tor nodded slowly. A warrior. V hummed, too solid. Too heavy. Kale grinned. Heavy, yeah. But they rule the land where they live. And we've lived with them for thousands of years, hunted them, studied them, even tamed their smaller cousins. He switched the hologram again, and a smaller, fiercer shape appeared, a honey badger, its black and white fur bristling as it tore into a snake, fearless and relentless. This one's my favorite, Kale said, his tone light but proud. Smaller than the bear or lion, but it doesn't care. It'll fight anything, snakes, bees, even bigger predators. Doesn't stop, doesn't give up. The footage rolled, the honey badger snarling, clawing, shrugging off venom like it was nothing. The class stared, wide-eyed. Tor rumbled, that's insane. Lila squeaked, it's so tiny. Kale laughed. Tiny, but tough. Like us. He stepped forward, the holograms cycling behind him, shark, orca, squid, bear, lion, honey badger, a parade of Earth's wild strength. This is Earth, he said, his voice steady and clear. Oceans that drown, lands that burn, creatures that kill. And humans? We don't just survive them. We build homes next to them. We chase them down to learn more. We turn their danger into stories, into challenges. He paused, meeting their stares. You thought we were soft because we don't glow or tower over mountains. But we're not soft. We're stubborn. Curious. Strong. The room went quiet, the weight of his words settling in. Tor uncrossed his arms, his stone face softening. You're tougher than stone, he said, almost to himself. V flared briefly, their hum thoughtful. A living paradox, fragile but unbreakable. Lila's feathers smoothed, her voice soft. I want to see it. Your world. Kale smiled at her. You'd like it. It's messy, but it's alive. Instructor Core finally spoke, their voice a weak bubble. This changes things. They floated to their podium, tapping a screen. Earth's classification must be updated. This isn't a low-threat habitat. It's something else. Kale watched as the Academy's galactic database flickered to life on a wall screen. Earth's entry shifted before their eyes, high-risk wonder. Native species defy logic. Inhabitants thrive in chaos. Extreme caution advised. A new note appeared, humans may appear weak. This is false. They swim with predators for sport. The class murmured, a mix of disbelief and admiration. Kale leaned back, satisfied. He'd come here as the fragile one, the human they pitied. Now they saw the truth, Earth was a death world, and humans were its masters. Instructor Core turned to Kale, their tentacles steadying. You've given us much to think about. Perhaps, too much. The class laughed, the tension breaking. Kale shrugged. Just doing the assignment. Tor stood, his heavy steps echoing as he approached. You're no weakling, human. I'd fight beside you. V pulsed closer. I'd study you, if I could keep up. Lila bounced in her seat. Can we visit? I want to see the honey badger. Kale chuckled. Sure. But let's start small. He tapped his pad, pulling up a simulation suite. How about a taste of Earth? Right here. The room's walls shifted, transforming into a virtual wilderness, crashing waves, towering trees, a grizzly bear lumbering in the distance. The class gasped as the simulation surrounded them, the air thick with the scent of salt and pine. Tor squared his shoulders, ready to test himself. V flickered, analyzing every detail. Lila stepped forward, feathers trembling with excitement. Kale guided them through it, showing them how humans fished shark-infested waters, built fires near bear dens, laughed in the face of storms. This is us, he said. Always pushing. Always learning. Instructor Corps watched, their form regaining its usual shape. Remarkable, they muttered, then louder, class dismissed. But I'm adding a new course, Human Resilience Studies. Sign up if you dare. The students cheered, already buzzing about Kale's world. As they filed out, some floating, some stomping, Kale stayed behind, shutting off the simulation. The room returned to its sleek, quiet state, but the energy lingered. He'd changed something today, not just their view of Earth, but their view of him. Lila lingered too, her feathers glowing faintly. You said there's more, right? What's a volcano? Kale paused, then laughed, a deep, genuine sound. Oh, you'll love that one. It's when the Earth itself fights back. Her eyes widened. Tell me. Before he could answer, a new student stumbled in, a small, spiky figure with curious eyes. I missed class. What's a volcano? Kale exchanged a look with Lila, grinning. Stick around. There's always more to share. He pulled up his pad, the hologram flickering to life, a mountain spewing fire, ash raining down. The new student gasped, and Lila clapped her feathered hands. Kale leaned back, content. Earth's story wasn't over, it never would be. The academy hummed with new rumors that night. Kale's presentation had spread like wildfire, students whispering about the Deathworlder who'd shattered their ideas. The galactic database update was official, and Instructor Corps' course filled up in hours. Tor started sketching Earth beasts on his stone tablet. V began a project to mimic human curiosity in their drones. Lila wrote a song about the honey badger, her voice echoing through the halls. Kale heard it all from his dorm, staring out at the stars. He'd come here to learn, but he'd taught them something instead. Humans weren't just survivors, they were dreamers, builders, explorers. He thought of home, the wild waters, the fierce land, the people who'd faced it all with grit and wonder. Maybe the aliens would never fully understand, but they'd respect it now. And that was enough. As he shut off his pad, a message blinked from Lila, next time, tell me about the storms. Kale smiled. There'd always be a next time. Earth's secrets were endless, and he was just getting started.